So just so you know,
Really
I'm
useful.
recording this call so that we can put this on the portal for future reference. But the purpose of this call is really to just give a real quick heads up about outputs. I think in the light of previous conversations about how busy we all are, there's a tendency to think that the job's done when we leave the room, and yet actually what we know is that from the client's point of view, the job isn't done until they get those outputs. And actually those outputs often remain in the business as a legacy of our work well beyond our presence. So, it's more than just a kind of tick in the box at the end of a meeting. It's actually a really important part of our service. And, the point at which really ideally we are getting clear about what outputs are required needs to be as part of the briefing so that it's designed in. Because I think where the biggest issues with outputs occur is when you get to the end of the meeting and the client, goes, actually, what I want is this. And that still can happen, but I think you mitigate against it if during the briefing call, you get the client to really think what onward work do they foresee and what medium do they need to communicate in, and therefore what do we need to produce out of the meeting. So I think that's the sort of real headline here, which is make sure that it's considered as part of the briefing. And then I guess the other thing is just to raise your awareness around what the different options are. So in a moment, I'm just going to quickly run through how we produce, if you like, our standard offer, which is included in the 3,500 day rates that we charge. But I think there are also other options. So you can scan very large charts and get them produced as a big file, which particularly with graphic recording is often what clients want. They sometimes want storybooks, if it's a big meeting and there's onward communication, to produce a book with the images that can be used to communicate the journey of the meeting. There are websites, particularly for large conferences. If you've got a big graphic recording, that can be turned into the home page of a website with hyperlinks to other materials from the conference. There are write-ups, but again, generally, that's not part of our standard offer. So I would recommend that if that client wants a write-up, they either get someone in-house to do it, or that we need to kind of cost that slightly differently. So those are the sort of ones, if you like, that have commonly cropped up in our work. What I'm going to go through now is just a quick view of how we produce our standard offering. But before we do that, does anyone have any questions about the different kind of outputs we produce?
No.
No? Okay. So what I've got open here in my, hopefully everyone can see on my screen, is Whiteboard. Now, we've had some trouble getting hold of Whiteboard, but Leslie now has CDs with this on. So if you don't already have it, or if you buy a new laptop and you need it, then Leslie is the source of all that is good when it comes to Whiteboard, because it's a really hard bit of software to get hold of. When I take photos of my charts in a meeting, I use a digital camera. The resolution gives me about 1 megabyte per picture, and I reckon that's about the minimum you need in order to get the resolution when you're doing the big charts. I then download those photos off the memory stick into a folder on my portal, so I might creatively call it outputs, for example, and then I go into Whiteboard, and I've got some here from a meeting that I did for Mars not long ago. So these are, if you like, are the kind of raw outputs, and Whiteboard allows you to open several charts at a time so that you can be efficient in cleaning them up. So you open those charts. So these look like sort of probably fairly typical Meeting Magic charts with some with post-its. And you'll see that each picture has a little line around the edge, which is Whiteboard's view of what it needs to be cleaning. But that usually needs a bit of tinkering. So you'll see on this front one, for example, it's not orientated the right way round. This one, second one's not too bad, but this other one's gone a bit peculiar. So you just need to select the edge that you want it to do, and then do clean all photos. I mean, I reckon you can generally do about 5 or 6 photos in one go, and it's the kind of thing that when you get slick at this, you can do it in a break. You know, it can be cleaning up images as you go.
So
So
what does it say clean all, Catherine?
in Tools, it's got the option to either do clean all or clean one photo.
Okay.
Yeah? Yeah, please ask questions as I go, because I'm sort of whizzing through this. So that's basically what they look like in their raw state when they're saved. My next top tip is how you save these. So I would recommend, you can see here that when you save the chart, you save it with in numerical order, so that when you come to drop them into your file, they're in the right order of the meeting. So for example, everything that's at the orientation stage of a meeting, I'll save with the prefix of 1 or A, but either way, so that you get them in the top of the folder. So this one. So we've got these charts now in Whiteboard. I then use a bit of software called Paint, which is standard on my desktop. It's a Microsoft software. I think it usually comes in accessories. I know there are other tools that you can use, but again, this is the one that I think is most standard on most PCs. I don't know how that works then if you're using a Mac. Though, Kendi, you use a Mac, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Do you have Paint or something on there?
Yeah, we have a similar thing called Paintbrush, which
Okay.
works in exactly the same way as Paint.
Right, great. So
Can I just ask a quick question for Kenda there? So Kenda, do you have Whiteboard on your Mac?
Yes, I do. In order to use it on my Mac, John, I need a piece of interface software called Crossover. But it's something you can download. It's about £30 and it works brilliantly. It enables you to use Microsoft products.
Right.
Okay, great.
Kendra, this is Tim. Could you send that information also to Amir and to Alan and Helen? I don't know if they're on Mac exclusively, but I think they all use Mac at some point.
Okay, sure, no problem.
So
Okay.
Sorry.
So I've now opened Paint and I've loaded one of the charts that I just cleaned into that. So what I then do is I tend to zoom out so I can see the whole chart, and you'll see down here at the bottom, you know, there are some kind of dirty bits. So where there are big chunks of kind of shadow, I'll just select the area and then press delete. So this is kind of like just, you know, getting the macro. So where there are big areas of grey sorted out. What I'll then do is zoom in and actually just check, because it tends to be the edges where you get areas. So you'll see here there's a bit more that needs removing. There's more here. I mean, I know this is slightly mind-numbing stuff, but it is what makes the outputs look good at the end. So there is something about paying attention to detail, and I guess also slightly subjectively to what extent you clean up all around the edges of the post-its. I know different people have different views of that, but I would say, you know, just get the whole thing looking a bit neater and tidier than the original. So that's now the whole chart cleaned up, and then you need to resave that. And then the final part of the process is dropping that into PowerPoint. So I have an imaginatively named blank output file in PowerPoint, which is set up that I can just drop information in. So you'll see I will obviously edit the title and the location and the date of the meeting to fit with the client. I've got some standard text that I then edit, but it usually is process text here. So this isn't about the content of the meeting, it's about the fact that on this date they met and the purpose of the meeting, that kind of stuff. And then you can drop in pictures into that. So I'll go into the folder that I created. So I have all my client work in one client's file. This was Mars R&D, the outputs, and this was Oars. And then you can shrink it down. I think the most important thing though is that you check that whatever size you make it, it's then legible. So generally making it as large as you can. And then you can either leave it like that on the page, or if you want, you can put a kind of little line around it. I think if you get the picture toolbar up here, you can put sort of shadow around it. So it depends on the effect you want. I think either can look good. I think it's more personal choice. And then once you've done that for all your images throughout the whole chart, the final thing is to then save it as a PDF. So I would generally check it by doing the slideshow version of PowerPoint and go through them and check that it's all legible and that you've got no typos. And then I have the functionality to just do save as, and then you can save it here as a PDF. And that's the version that goes to the client as the final output. And I find also when it's in a PDF version that it tends to be a smaller file. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it makes it easier then to email. So that's my whistle-stop tour through the process for how of documentation. And I think we should aim to get that standard output to a client within at least 48 hours of the meeting. I mean, I know with travel and stuff it's not always possible, but I think generally that's part of the kind of customer delight that, you know, if they do a meeting and it finishes on the Friday, they get in on the Monday and the outputs are on their inbox. It's kind of a bit of a wow factor. And in fact, for this meeting in Mars, because we had a lot of virtual participants in the meeting, I was cleaning the outputs at the end of each day and produced it on a file and emailed it to everybody each night, so that the virtual participants could get up to speed on the outputs before we started the next day. So I think learning to get slick at this is, again, all part of our service and keeping the clients happy with the end-to-end service we offer. So that's my whistle-stop tour. What questions do you have about how we do this?
So I have a question around size, because
Yeah.
Even when you do PDF it, which does help somewhat with the size, I do find that it produces quite large files.
Yeah.
And generally, if you keep it under 10 meg, then you can email it to a client. But if there have been big meetings, then I sometimes find it a bit of a challenge to achieve that and still keep the resolution really high.
Yeah.
So is there some way that we could look at perhaps creating sort of a virtual, I mean, for some clients I've used Dropbox to send it to them, and even posted it out on a flash drive if necessary, so that they get it that way. Do you have any sort of recommendations for that in the way that you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my concern about Dropbox is security. You know, with all our clients, we have these big confidentiality clauses, and Dropbox is I don't know how secure Dropbox is. I do know that the next version of our SharePoint, they're talking about us being able to create a space where there would be external access. And I think that would be the ideal in the long run, to get a place on the portal. I mean, it also means then we get visibility of each other's output, so there's a double whammy there. But also then we own the security of that space, which I think is much better for us and for our clients. I can get Leslie to do a bit of homework and find out if that's possible, because I think that's where I'd like us to go. In the short term, I mean, Dropbox is an option. The other one I tend to use is YouSendIt. And what I like about using YouSendIt is it doesn't sort of sit on the web in a place that somebody can kind of, I guess, hack into it and, you know, read it. It's kind of just a temporary link between you and your client. So I've used that for large files. I think the flash drive is a good idea as well, or good old-fashioned CDs as well is another option.
Yeah.
The other option as well I've had is that you can create a web res version. So you can use something called NX Powerlight, which is a piece of software that will reduce the file size of PowerPoint files and then convert it into a PDF, and it will be a much smaller file size. The downside is you don't get as good a resolution, but sometimes it's an option if you just need to get something quick and dirty out to somebody quickly, and then obviously you need to follow up by sending the full version on a disk or a memory stick or something.
What was the name of that?
It's NX Powerlight. I can send that on an email.
Powerlight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It only works. It's only compatible with PowerPoint.
That's fine.
But I can send the details.
Kenda, are you reducing the photograph size down?
I do reduce it down, yes, but I sort of, it's a little bit of trial and error sometimes, John, to get it to a size that's manageable within the file, but still
readable,
legible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I spend more time tinkering with it than I would like to have to spend tinkering with it because of the file size issue.
Another option, Kenda, that I again used for this R&D forum was that the big plan, which had lots of post-its on at the end of the meeting that was kind of critical for their ongoing work, I actually sent it as a separate JPEG to the administrator, so that she'd got the original full, 3 meg or whatever size file of that one chart.
I have done. Yeah, that's a good idea. I have done that before as well, and I have actually even chopped the outputs up and sent them in a kind of a day 1, day 2 format, and that helps as well. But it's just an ongoing challenge with the size.
Yeah. So any other questions or ideas? Any other questions or ideas about how we provide outputs to our clients?
Has anybody ever come up with something odd that apart from just what we've been discussing on PDF or the scan charts?
What, in terms of a client,
something different?
A client request?
Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, I think our client requests have driven our R&D really of outputs. The idea of the website came as a result of a client going, how are we going to communicate all these different bits of information from the conference because they're all in different formats? And we said, well, that's when. So I think actually the opportunity is when a client does make a odd request that we kind of use that as all right, well, they might not be the only person that needs this. How could we do this? And then how does it become part of our offer to other clients? I think particularly with technology changing as fast as it is, it could well be that in a year's time there's another format that is available. But I think there's something about us being very clear that this is our standard and we're happy to work with other options, but there might sometimes be a cost implication if there's going to be a lot of time processing it.
Yep.
And also using their in-house expertise where you can. So when we did that website, I think we've done websites for a couple of clients with conferences. We've actually liaised with their IT departments to get it put on the portal rather than, us doing stuff that frankly we're not really educated to do. That's not our skill set.
I think I need to invest in a new camera. I saw the one that you used at Verdun for Mars, Catherine. That nice little sort of pocket-sized one, and the snap and shoot one.
Yeah.
Because I've got a sort of a bigger, bulkier version of that, and it's not very practical. And then the iPhone camera is okay, but you don't get quite as good a picture, I don't think, sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that
you could get one of those sort of things.
you can get really good. I mean, the one I've got, it wasn't cheap, but basically all the money I paid on the lens. So, you can get quite sophisticated, very small cameras nowadays with high resolution and good quality. And I think the other thing to look for is then one where the memory stick from the camera can go direct into the PC. Because again, I think that makes it much quicker rather than transferring files, with cables and stuff like that. So another thing to look for. And in fact, you can buy, if you can't do that, you can buy little card readers that connect separately as well through a USB as another option.
Yeah, I've got a very complicated system here. I've got a Mac, but I don't have whiteboard on my Mac. I've got a whiteboard is on my old Windows laptop, so I've got to convert, change around and swap.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to do it last time. But I think, Kenda, what you were saying was a good idea to get that crossover.
Yeah, it really works
software.
well, John.
Yeah.
So what I'd say is, if you have any further problems with documentation, just to emphasize, this really is all part of the end-to-end service with the client. It's really important, even though sometimes it feels like the final straw. So if you do have issues with documentation, do ask. I mean, Leslie's actually quite good at doing documentation too. She has all the software. She knows how to do it. So if I'm not available, she, I'm sure, can help. And, maybe taking a bit of time to look at how you're doing it and get yourself set up so that it's efficient will save a lot of pain going forward. Having the right hardware and software and getting so that you can do it quite slick will not only ease your life but also delight the client if they get outputs in a very timely way.
I think just to add one last thing here is that as new members come on, I think that taking photographs can be a part of the flow.
Yeah.
Because once or twice I missed taking a picture of key moments or some kind of activity that was happening. So I think having that as a deliberate part of the meeting plan,
yeah,
can serve as a reminder.
Yeah, help you remember. That's a good point.
To record the information.
Okay.
And Catherine, is there anything in particular? You said that we had a disappointing client recently. What was any insights as to what didn't work?
I think there have been two things. There's been three slight niggles. One of them is around the format. So any existing clients of ours expect this quality of outputs. And we had an associate who did a meeting. It was a terrible room, so actually partly why he didn't do big charts was because of the room. But nevertheless, it was interesting how the client who'd worked with us for many years before noticed and commented on the fact that the outputs were just not the same as she'd expected. And then the other one was timeliness. So last week we had a complaint from a client about a report that they needed for future meetings not coming through in a timely manner. So I think it's both quality and timeliness are a critical part of our flow. I am going to have to go now, but what I'd ask is if you've got any other questions, either email me or we can continue the conversation on Facebook. I'm going to post this recording on our portal, and in if weeks or months down the line, if you do have queries or concerns, to please touch base with me or Leslie, or really just reach out and get help if you're having trouble with the outputs. It's an important part of our deliverables. So thanks for joining the call. Hope you have a good week, and catch up with you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Catherine.
Bye.
Thanks.